Welcome back into the Red Zone podcast. My name is Colten Bartholomew, your review football beat reporter here for the Wisconsin State Journal. I'm joined by a longtime basketball and football reporter, now columnist here for the State Journal, Jim Polzin. And we've got a football pack show for you. Going to be a lot of football pack shows as we are here at training camp week. It's wild, Jim. It's first week of August. Guys are back on campus. I keep seeing all their social media posts, getting back to their old campus haunts, getting in their new apartments and stuff. An exciting time, but it's go time, really. I mean, you look up, we're recording this on Wednesday. You guys are gonna hear this Thursday morning. We're a month away from the first game. It's first game September 4th against Penn State, and we're a month away. It's wild.
It was weird being up at Packers camp last week and actually seeing practices and having some sort of normalcy. Now there were still restrictions we had to follow, and we couldn't get too close to the field, but actually seeing a live practice, and it wasn't in pads or anything, at that point, it was just kind of like, whoa, here we are. And we've kind of finally pulled through this a little bit. And it felt, like I said, there's no normal. It's a new normal now, but it felt good. I'll say that. Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt at Big Ten Media Days. And I feel like I'm going to get that same way when we get to training camp. It's like, it's not 100% back to what we would all like it to be and where we want it to be soon, but it's something. It's more normal than sitting on Zooms and staring at guys with 17 faces looking back at them. It's going to be better. I know that.
Right. Football storylines, and we're just so looking forward to telling football storylines and not COVID storylines.
Not virus and not
right.
Because shockingly, I don't know if you got your degree, but we are still not epidemiologists or virologists or whatever you got to be.
I would have considered that. I wish I would have considered that option back in the day.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of science class, and I wasn't all that great at that. So glad I stuck with this. But for the podcast today, Jim and I are going to give you our four, top or four players that we're the most excited to see when camp starts, which will be on Friday. Like I said, we're talking to you guys here on Thursday with Media Day on Thursday morning. So going to be a lot of stories coming at you there. But we're going to give you four players for each of us that we're most excited to see. And then we're going to continue our position preview series with wide receivers and tight ends. Lots of familiar faces in this pass catching group. But I think some of these new guys and some of the changes the existing guys are making this year are going to be really interesting. So we're going to get into all of that right after this. All right, Jim, we are back. We're going to be talking about our four players that we are most excited to see. And you brought this up right before we started recording. I think it's a great idea. We're going to go snake draft style. And I'm going to go first just because I'm the football guy and you're the columnist that gets to jump in and out and do whatever the hell he wants, seems like. So that's how we're going to go. And my number one player that I'm the most excited to see, a little bit off the board, it's a true freshman. It's Hunter Wohler. And I say that because the Muskego product, the four-star recruit, the guy that's been, one of the best high school players in the state of Wisconsin in a long time on the defensive side of the ball. There's a massive opportunity at safety, I feel like, when you look at this group, because the top two guys in Scott Nelson and Colin Wilder, they're pretty set. I'm not saying that they're set in stone as the starters, but when you got two seniors and guys that have played this much, Jim Leonard trusts them and they're going to get a lot of snaps. But behind them, everybody's unproven. Not that they're true freshmen unproven, but everybody's kind of played a little bit here, a little bit there, not very consistently. And I think that if Hunter Wohler comes in and shows the willingness to hit, the play recognition, the ability to play the ball in the air that he did in high school, I mean, there's a chance that he's in the rotation. I would be stunned if he's not on special teams, all the coverages, all the returns. I mean, I think he's going to be a guy that plays right away. And I don't think Jim Leonard's going to be scared of, this guy being a true freshman. If he comes in and puts the work in, I think Leonard's going to put him out there.
Yeah, that was a big get in recruiting. It's funny looking back at the time they had him as a really highly regarded safety that was getting recruited by a lot of good schools in one class. And they had Braylon Allen, who was considered a safety at the time and very, very highly recruited in the class below him. And then they end up being in the same class because Allen reclassifies and then Allen switches positions. So to get guys like that in this state, this state is known for producing a lot of talent, but it's typically the big guys. Mm-hmm. So to get guys like that, in the same class, I thought was huge. Also brings me to my pick in snake draft style. I'm going with Braylon Allen. And I talked about him a lot last week. I'm so intrigued by a guy who, again, like was a safety, maybe a linebacker, and then they moved him to the other side of the ball because there's a lack of depth at tailback, and now they're going to give him a shot at that position. And, again, we haven't seen him yet. Our first chance to see him this week, but all the reports we hear is very glowing on how, the type of player he can be. Powerful, got some speed, sounds a pretty smart kid. It sounds like it's a workout warrior. So I'm anxious to see, what he can do and where he fits in on the depth chart and what kind of impact he can make. So that's my first pick. And the reason we did the snake draft style is because I'm also picking a tailback at my second pick, and that's Ches Malusi, the transfer from Clemson, who, again, I'm really anxious to see where he fits in, what he looks like. Another guy who was really highly recruited out of high school, didn't really get much playing time at Clemson because he had Travis Etienne ahead of him. But he comes here and there's a chance for carries. I mean, Jalen Berger is back, but had a really solid freshman season, but never got past 15 carries in a game last year. We still don't know. I mean, the jury's still out on how good of a back he can be. So I think Malusi has a chance to come in and, if not be 1B, maybe take over that spot, be the primary guy. So certainly the one guy I want to see Friday, just to see where he's at and what he can do on the field is Malusi and also Allen. I think those guys at a really intriguing position are two guys that, I want to see.
Oh, that's a great point. And it's wild to think because you look at Jalen Berger and Ches Malusi, they're relatively about the same size, 6 foot-ish, both guys, and about 200 pounds. And you get a guy like Allen, who's, I don't know his exact birthday. I'm going to assume he's still 17, thinking as should be going into his senior year of high school, but he's 6'2" and about 240 pounds. And you mentioned the workouts that you see on Twitter. I mean, the weights this kid's lifting. I've spoken with a couple of guys that are, powerlifting coaches or strength and conditioning coaches, and they're like, that's not normal. Like, not that you needed a coach to tell you that, but it's like that's an advanced level of dedication to lifting and just natural strength that this kid's putting up those numbers. I mean, you look at some of the Olympic ones too, where it's the clean and jerk and the power cleans and all that type of stuff, where it's your full body strength, and the squats that he puts up on his Twitter too. It's pretty wild. So I think you're right on that. I think that's a obviously super important position for this team, but those two guys are going to be really interesting because, man, if you can get 3 backs, I mean, that's always been a thing at Wisconsin with the recruiting they do at running back, but you can get a number of guys that there's not that massive change in either speed or athleticism like there has been the last few years, where you go from like a Jonathan Taylor to a Garrett Groshek or even Berger to a Groshek the last season. Not having that change when you keep fresh running backs in there, I think it's going to be pretty incredible to see what they could do if these guys all live up to the hype.
Allen's wearing jersey number 0. What do you think of that?
I appreciate the fact that somebody finally took the dive and did it, since it got allowed last season. I don't know about being the freshman running back doing it. I thought an older, especially a defensive back, I thought was going to try to switch over. But I got to appreciate this kid does not seem to be afraid of putting a little attention on himself and putting himself out there. I want to see him with the ball in his hands. I think you make a good pick with your first one with him because there's a lot to like there. But jumping over to my second pick, this is a guy that's been talked about for a long time. It's Logan Brown, former 5-star offensive tackle. Throughout the spring, he was in a position battle with Tyler Beach for that left tackle spot. I think that's going to continue here in the fall. I think Beach is a little bit ahead just because of the work that he's put in the last few years and the trust that he's built up with Joe Rudolph and the offensive staff. But it's wild to watch Logan Brown, man, because number one, he's huge. Like I'm looking at the roster that they finally sent out today. And he's 6'6" and 311 pounds. I mean, he's just a massive human being. The athleticism that he showed, the lateral movement when he's coming off the line, when he's feeling good, you're just like, how does anybody get around him? And then 2 plays later, somebody beats him off the line and he looks like he shouldn't be anywhere near the field yet. It's just a weird inconsistency. Joe Rudolph said it pretty point blank. He's got to get more consistent and be that immovable guy play after play. If that happens here in this fall, I would not be stunned if day one your left tackle starter is Logan Brown, because he's that special.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's just a position we haven't had to think about for a while, being kind of a new guy, right? Like Cole Van Lanen held it. It's just kind of been a position that's been pretty steady. So a big camp for that position and those two guys you mentioned.
For sure. All right, your third pick. Oh, no, I got to go again. Excuse me. My third pick, I lost in the snake. It's a two-person snake, and I screwed it up already. How about that? My third pick is Chamari DK. We saw what he could do last year at times. I always go back to that big play against Northwestern because of how good that secondary was. To get open against those guys and score about 50-yard touchdown was impressive. I think with the injuries that they had at wide receiver throughout the year, it was kind of unfair because a true freshman who, when you're planning your season out, you're thinking, okay, he's going to be against a lot of third corners, ends up going against a lot of teams' number ones. So the fact that he wasn't consistently getting separation and doing some things that you would like to see out of a top receiver, I kind of give him a pass for, because again, he was a true freshman and shouldn't have really been expected to be a top receiver. I think the thing that is going to help him a lot this year is he did some good things on crossing patterns, and assuming the health of Kendrick Pryor and Janie Davis, he'll be able to do a lot more of those type of things, the things he's good at right away. So I'm excited to see what he looks like back in that role where he's the third guy as opposed to the first guy. And I think that's going to be a big camp for him. And again, like I said, if they are healthy at that wide receiver spot, I think he's in for some big plays because he's already developed that trust and relationship with Graham Mertz.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I liked him a lot. I mean, he just has kind of everything: good size, decent speed, good hands, I thought. I mean, seems like a kid who gets it, right? It's just so hard for freshmen to come in and make an impact at that position, it's especially here. And he was able to do that, and especially when all the pressure is on him after some of the older guys get hurt. I walked away from last season thinking this kid could be a stud at some point. Now, I don't know that that's going to be this year necessarily. I do think he'll kind of continue to play a complementary role, but I think this year could kind of be a springboard into being the guy next year. And I do think he could be a really good one.
I'm with you there. All right, go to your third pick now.
My third pick is tight end Jack Eschenbach, who, again, I think everybody knows that Jake Ferguson is the guy at that position. He's poised, I think, for a big final season with the Badgers. But I think this year, to some degree, has to be about finding who's the next in line, and also finding complementary pieces to Ferguson to take some of the pressure off him. And Ferguson down in Indianapolis was again raving about Eschenbach, and just the fact that here's a guy who's 6'6", 245, good speed, good hands. I think they like his upside, and I really do think he could be a solid complementary piece. We're going to get into this position a little bit more later, so I'm not going to mention some of the other names here, but he's a guy that intrigues me as someone that could, again, when we're making these picks, we're not predicting breakout seasons necessarily, but it's guys that we want to see that have they taken another step in their development. And I think he could be a guy that certainly fits that label.
Yeah. When I was watching spring practices, Jim, there were times that he'd catch a ball over the middle and I would be writing down notes like, oh, good catch by Ferguson. Then see him throw the ball back to coaches, be like, oh, excuse me, that was Eschenbach. Yeah. So, I mean, this guy's got all the raw tools that you want. He talked a lot about in the spring getting better as a blocker, and that helps clear that path to the field for him. I think that's a great pick because you mentioned it. If they can get a little bit they can match some of the production with Jake Ferguson off the field, or not always have to rely on him in the red zone, it's just going to make him better for the long haul, and that they're going to need that all season.
My final pick, Isaac Townsend, defensive end who transferred from Oregon, originally from Colorado. 6'5", 275 defensive end. It's not a position of need necessarily in terms of finding a starter. However, I do think, actually it is a position of need, finding a starter. I don't know why I said that. I think it's a position where they need to, find some depth. They're replacing Garrett Rand. They're replacing Isaiah Loudermilk. So finding, getting a guy who's got some experience and I think was important. You don't want to rely so much on the young guys. And Paul Christ was very, very, I don't want to say raving, but spoke very highly of Townsend down in Indianapolis as someone who's come in, and you always look for good fits when you talk about transfers and finding guys that'll come in and fit into the system and fit into the culture. And they seem to think he's done that in a short amount of time, that he's fit in really good with his teammates. And he can be someone that they rely on to play.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's super intriguing for me about Townsend is he was a guy that was blocked by a senior when he was a freshman, and then a guy that stayed because he got hurt, and senior as a sophomore, and then along with that, a defensive end for Oregon, Kayvon Thibodeau, who, if you don't know about him, if you don't remember him from the Rose Bowl in 2019, or excuse me, January 1st, 2020, this kid's a freak. He's a 5-star, one of the top rated recruits in the country, and is like top 3, top 5 on pretty much every draft board out there for the 2022 class. So I don't think that Townsend not getting on the field for Oregon is a reflection as much on him as it is what they had at the end. So I think this could end up being a steal. And I think you make a great point about him fitting in, because that's tough anytime you transfer, especially here. I feel like where there's that culture and mindset of being overlooked, or, kind of that blue collar stuff. He's come in and immediately embrace that and put in the work like that. So I think that's a really interesting guy to watch. And you mentioned it. There's snaps there at defensive end, and we know Matt Henningsen's going to be there. We think Rodas Johnson's going to be there, but Townsend's got a chance to really assert himself here in camp. And then my last one's also on the defensive side. It's Spencer Lytle. And I wrote about him in the spring, about the improvements that he's made, the steps that he's taken to not only stay healthy. I mean, he's talked about the challenges that he's faced throughout his career of staying healthy, and how frustrating that can be. But I think just the moves and the athleticism he showed around the edge, beating tackles. I mean, a lot of times in one-on-ones, he was going against Logan Bruss and Tyler Beach, some of those top guys at tackle for Wisconsin. And he was not always beating them, but at least, making them work and or being very, very competitive on these reps. Sometimes he would beat them, sometimes you get around, and you're talking about 2 tackles who I think are going to be 2 of the best in, or at least in Bruss's case, I think one of the best in the Big Ten this year. Consistently, at least being good against them in those drills is impressive. And I just want to see him do it in these full pad, full 11 on 11 settings here in camp, because they need it. Honestly, at that outside linebacker position, what they got last year production-wise isn't enough, and they're going to need more pass rush. They're going to need more athleticism there. I think there might be some snaps there on third downs from a guy like a Noah Burks, that if you put in Spencer Lytle instead of Burks, maybe there's a little more speed, a little more pass rush ability. So I think it's a huge camp coming up for Lytle, because the opportunity's there.
Yeah, so this topic came up in my mailbag this week. Open Gym, check it out, second installment of it. And someone was asking about linebackers behind Noah Burks, and Lytle was one of them they mentioned. I think you made some good points about Burks. What I said in my answer in the mailbag was Noah Burks, they always talk about being smart, tough, and dependable. And I think Burks checks a lot of those boxes, right? But I also think you're right that could you find some more splash plays at that position, because it's always been, that spot has been so dynamic for a lot of years here, and wasn't necessarily so last year. So guys like Lytle, is he someone that can step in and make a jump this year and be that guy on third down that can get in the backfield and cause some disruption? We'll see, because he's a guy that on signing day a couple years ago, was a guy that was intriguing, and it's been a kind of a slow build up, and now he'll get his chance this year. He'll get his chance in camp to prove if he belongs on the field. And I get why you made him one of your picks.
Yeah. One more thing on Burks, because we'll get to him when we get to outside linebacker position preview in a couple of weeks. But the thing about Noah Burks is he's never wrong. He might not make the play just because athletically or speed wise, he wasn't able to bring the guy down, but he'll be there. And that's something that if you're a defensive coach, if you just know, like, all right, we know one guy is always going to be in his gap, never going to make the mistake mentally that makes a big play for the defense or for the offense. that's something that's hard to turn down when you have that option to have out there every play.
Coming back for the sixth year didn't cause a lot of, like it certainly didn't get the reaction of some of those other seniors that decided to play another year. But I do think it's important, even if he's not a guy who puts up big numbers. I just think he's probably good for that room, just in terms of having that experience and being a guy that's pretty respected. I think that's, I think it's probably an under the radar big thing for the Wisconsin in the offseason to have him come back.
Absolutely. All right, Jim, let's jump into a little position preview. Last week we did quarterbacks and running backs. So if you didn't miss that one, go back and download that and check it out. You can listen to what we think about the Badgers backfield this season. Now we're out to the skill guys on the outside, the pass catchers here with the wide receivers and tight ends. I want to start with the wide receivers. I mean, we mentioned DK earlier. Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor are back. That's a big kind of boon for this team, because if they weren't, you're looking at DK and a bunch of unproven guys as your weapons this season. So big help to have them back. The thing about this group is how, especially in camp here, how much can they get some younger guys like a Marcus Allen, a freshman this year, Skylar Bell, AJ Abbott, who had a good spring, Devin Chandler, who started to pop off last year and had a good spring. How can they mix in some of those guys' reps with what Danny Davis, Kendrick Pryor, and DK need to get prepared and get ready for the season, to really maximize what they have in both that older and that younger group? Because Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor need some reps to get up to speed with the offense and be on the same page with Mertz. But you've also got they're older guys. They got hurt last year. I mean, it was concussion, so it's not like you can say like their legs or, they need the time off, but just try to pace those guys so that they're kind of ready for when the season starts. You don't need them, the first week of August trying to make huge plays and kind of run their legs out. I think you kind of know what you have in them. I think camp for this wide receiver group, these young guys really have a chance to start climbing, making some noise at where they should be and the positions they can play, especially once these older guys are out of the picture.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are really two storylines with this position group going into camp, and that's, the older established guys and probably, feel like they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after last season, the way that it went, and just not getting on the field, and they're probably frustrated. And here's their one last chance. They both decided to come back, so one last chance to kind of prove themselves. I don't know that either one of them is going to put up massive numbers, but I do know that it helps this team. It helps Graham Mertz to have them back, and if they can stay healthy, for the whole season, I think that'd be huge. I think that's probably if this offense is going to go from solid to really good, or from really good to great, I think they need Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor to stay healthy and have somewhat big seasons. So I think that's one storyline, but I agree with you that finding the next, right, that the younger group, and I, you picked DK as one of your guys to watch. I think you could have gone with Abbott or Devin Chandler, and it would have been just as interesting, right? I think those guys came to mind when I was trying to pick guys. Is that you've seen bits and pieces, you've seen flashes. Now, can they do it more consistently? And we saw a big play from Chandler late in the year. Abbott flashed at times. What else do those guys have left in them, and can they make another big jump? With a new position coach, by the way. Or with a, so it's
first real year position coach.
First real year where they actually get to work, with him closely and stuff. And so I'm anxious to watch the development of that group because I think there's some talent. I think they've done well in recruiting for a couple classes in a row now. Now, what can those guys do consistently on the field?
Yeah, I think Chandler has a chance, because if you look at the speed difference that he has versus some of the guys, not only in the defensive backfield, but in his own position group, I really think he could be that type of game breaker player like Aaron Cruikshank was back in 2019, that you get him the ball in space and then just let him go. I think he's going to end up being the return man, especially on kicks this year for the Badgers. I think he could be that spark plug on offense that maybe he only gets a dozen plays or so, but the 3 touches he gets, he makes a big one out of one of them. And sometimes you just need that to get your offense 20 yards that you don't have to grind out. It's trying to get some of those splash plays. I think the big thing for this wide receiver group is getting separation down the field, because when you go back and look at the advanced metrics for Graham Mertz last season, he is elite when he's able to push the ball 15, 20 yards down the field or further, right? When you have all the issues that they had at the wide receiver group last season, they just weren't able to. They didn't have people that could get open down the field like that. And it had to be all short, and it let defenses really compact. And I think this season is going to be all about, if they're healthy, getting guys downfield and letting Mertz rip the ball deep, because that's what they're good at. And I think you have this full complement of receivers out there. There's some big plays to be made.
What's a good over-under in terms of receiving yards for the leader, whoever leads just among this group? Because, I mean, it very well could be Jake Ferguson that leads the team in receptions. What do you think can someone get to 800? Is that too high?
I think if, because I'm trying to put it in context. So back in 19, Quintez Cephas is a little bit over 900, but at the same time, he was getting targeted almost every passing play. So that might not be entirely fair. So I think 800, but then you have 3 or 4 guys in that 500 to 800 range. I think that'd be the ideal one, right? Like a little more balance, especially when you got some of these older guys like Danny Davis, that's a proven deep threat, and Kendrick Pryor that can make big plays. I think getting 3 to 4 guys in that 500 to 800 range is a realistic goal number wise. I'm glad you brought up numbers, because I saw one this summer, and I know a lot of people did because they got spread out. How real do you think that video that Wisconsin put out on Kendrick Pryor's 40 time being a 4.27 is? Because that is ridiculously fast.
Right. And while I've always thought he's a guy who's fast, I didn't think he was like track
right.
Superstar fast.
Yeah, 4.2 is track superstar fast.
Right. I mean, heck, if it is true, that maybe changes what this group can become, right? Because I do think he's another guy that's shown flashes of a guy that could be really, really good. We just haven't seen it consistently. I was going to ask you, and I got this question this week for the mailbag, but I didn't answer it. I couldn't fit it in. Do you think we'll see these guys in jet sweeps situations more this year? Certainly will.
Davis and Pryor?
Let me rephrase that. It'll be more than last season, because it was, they were always hurt.
They only played
right?
2-3 games, yeah, but
right.
Honestly, I don't know when you're talking about Davis and Pryor. Davis was in that Michigan game was honestly one of the best options they had, because Michigan just could not stop that on the left side. But that was also when he got hurt. So I do wonder if they maybe leave some of those jet sweeps to the younger guys. Devin Chandler would be a prime candidate, in my opinion, just because we see what happens when those guys aren't on the field. And I don't know, it's just different when you're running and you're not naturally past the linebackers and the guys that are much bigger than you, like they were when they're doing those jet sweeps. So I think you're not going to see it as much from the guys like Pryor and Davis, but I think they're still going to get that in with maybe a guy like DK, but Devin Chandler, maybe these freshmen, maybe Skylar Bell or Marcus Allen can work their way in there if they are showing enough in practice. But I would be a little hesitant to put those older guys back in that same spot.
Fair enough.
All right, let's jump over to the tight ends, because it's another deep group. We mentioned it a little bit with Eschenbach, so we won't go right off the top. Jake Ferguson might be the most known commodity in the Big Ten coming back this year. When you look at all the position groups and everything, I mean, you just know what you're going to get from that guy season in, season out. Consistent red zone target, guy that's got good hands. We mentioned they've got to get some more reps on other guys just so he doesn't get worn down throughout a season. It happened again last year. He was dealing with some shoulder stuff too. But the depth of this group, we mentioned Eschenbach earlier. Sorry if you guys keep hearing Slack. It's popping off and off the Slack. But they've got to get guys like Eschenbach, like we mentioned before. But I think like Clay Cundiff, Cam Large, some of these other guys that they've been recruiting the last few years at this spot to step up and be able to play snaps and not lose anything, because I think what we saw in the spring, partially because of the injuries they had. But I think that this team is going to be a lot of 2 tight end sets, not always maybe on the line. Maybe you split Jake Ferguson out into the slot. Maybe you put one into the backfield as a fullback. But I think they're going to use this tight end group a lot in some different ways. And it's going to be these guys that we maybe haven't seen before stepping up into some new roles. And if they do, it just makes this offense more dynamic.
Yeah, I remember talking to Mickey Turner, was it 2 years ago already? I think it was two media days ago, about like Clay Cundiff and Hayden Rucci and how he liked them so much. And, those guys have gotten time, but again, haven't in some ways they've gotten their spotlight stolen by Ferguson, which makes sense, right? But I do think they can be really good players and guys that you can depend on. So it's those guys that I'm anxious to see. Another one that always, every year it comes up, Jalen Franklin. Again, so intriguing as a prospect and as an athlete. Is there a place for him, do you think? I mean, can they find a role for him?
Yeah, you watch it on air or you watch 7-on-7, you're like, man, how can anybody cover this guy with the size and the speed he has? And then you get to 11-on-11, it doesn't translate as apples to apples. And I don't understand why. I wonder how much more he has in this transition, because last season before the year he moves from outside linebacker to tight end. He'd played tight end before in his career in high school and stuff, but it wasn't at the college level. I wonder if this is the camp that he kind of puts it together, because you're right. That's a weapon that athletically it changes the game for you. And I think if you're the Wisconsin staff, maybe he's the guy that you split out. Maybe you use him as a massive wide receiver as opposed to an inline tight end. And I'm glad you mentioned Rucci, because he's going to play a lot too. He's the best blocker in the group. That was kind of a title that was not contested throughout spring, and guys kind of said like that's his role as of now. Like Rucci's the guy that they trust to be their blocker. Maybe he ends up being that fullback role when they need that as well. But I think there's just this group is it's deep, but it's so unproven past that top guy that this camp is really going to show like, all right, there's going to be 3 or 4 of you that are going to be able to get snaps. Like, who's going to earn them? And that's a good problem to have if you're the coaches, but it really does put the pressure on these players. Like, you might get 5 snaps where a ball could come your way. You've got to make sure that they're good ones.
Yeah, it's really another position. And we've said this a couple of times today, where you've got established seniors on the top of the depth chart, and this season is about finding complementary pieces and also kind of figuring out who's next and who can you rely on starting next season. So a really interesting, I think that could be a really good group. I really do. I think that could be a really good position. But there's a lot of work to be done in camp, certainly.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's one of those groups that you see the potential, you see the raw stuff athletically. It has to come together eventually, because I think if you go into another year where Ferguson's really your only receiving threat from that spot, the offense is going to be much more limited than what it should be when you look at what you've got athletically. So big year for that group, big year for these pass catchers. I think talking to these guys and talking to Ferguson down in Indianapolis, I think they took it kind of personal that they couldn't throw the ball last year or they couldn't do it consistently. And I think that they kind of wear that L on their chest and kind of say like, this has got to change this year. And they think that getting this passing game going kind of starts with them, and they're not wrong. I do kind of believe that.
Speaking of Ferguson, I just want to say this. We had him on the podcast, not that long ago in the spring. And again, down in Indy, he's so impressive how far he's come as a, not so much as a player, but as a speaker and as a leader. I think he's matured, and they all, players do for the most part mature. So this isn't the first player to make that transition and transformation. But I just remember talking to him as a freshman, and it was hard to get much out of him. He seemed like kind of a shy kid and very reserved. And now he's turned into very, very well-spoken and smart and just, funny, knows when to mix funny and when to be serious. I'm just really impressed by his evolution as a leader here.
Yeah. I mean, you saw him holding court on Big Ten Network when all the Wisconsin guys are up there. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. All right, we're going to keep these shorter until the season comes. And then, Jim and I like to ramble and give you all of our picks and do all that stuff. So we'll keep it shorter here in the preseason. A ton of stuff coming your way on madison.com. Jim mentioned already, you can go read his column, his Q&A column. Make sure you guys get participating in that. Email Jim or tweet at him questions you've got. Anything Wisconsin sports, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks, whatever. Anything funny, go for it. Shoot them at Jim. We're going to have all types of stuff for Media Day. Lots of content coming your way. Badgers football is back. Practice starts on Friday. We'll have a lot of stuff. Make sure you're on madison.com. I believe the deal I saw now is like it's $1 for 6 months is what we're running right now. So you can get yourself covered through football season and most of basketball season for $1. So I suggest you do that. So for Jim Polzin, I am Colten Bartholomew. Thank you guys very much for listening.